meaning a pope has been elected, or black, meaning they are not there yet. We are not hearing any bells at this point. The audio signal, we have been told that the cardinals will use when they have chosen the pope. They'll ring some bells so we won't make any mistakes on what color what color the smoke is coming out of the little smokestack. Now, our CBS News correspondent, John Roberts, is in Rome. John, what color does it appear to be?
Well, Bob, I'm just sort of coordinating here the color of the smoke along with the timing. It would seem to me as though they've only been able to take one vote this afternoon, and typically they do not burn the ballots until after 2 ballots if there has not been an election of a pope. The smoke has been going now for some 30 seconds, and typically by this time it would have turned black. I don't want to make any assumptions, but at this point the smoke does appear to be white. And there would not be reason for smoke to be coming out of that chimney if it was not a successful election for the Pope until about an hour and 10 minutes from now. Father Paul Robichaud has been standing by with me all afternoon. And Father, what's your take on what we're seeing coming out of the chimney of the Sistine Chapel?
Well, again, I couldn't agree more with you. This seems to have been only one ballot, and we shouldn't see smoke unless it's white. And it appears to be white smoke, although we're not hearing any bells. This is extraordinary situation because it suggests that after 4 ballots we have a pope, and that means that someone very quickly gained a great deal of momentum in the election for the new pope, and looks as though we have a pope.
Now, Vatican Radio apparently is saying that it's black smoke, but the smoke has not changed color, though, as Father Paul Robichaud just said, we have not heard the bells of St. Peter's ringing. We can hear from our vantage point up here waves of applause coming up from St. Peter's Square. Now, in a bit of a change, during one of their general congregations this year, and there are the bells. Are those bells? I thought I heard a bell ring there. During one of their general congregations, the cardinal said that in addition to the smoke signal, just to be sure that the indication of the papal election was clear, that they would ring the bells from St. Peter's. It's quite a windy day here in Rome, and so the sound is sort of drifting back and forth. So, sometimes you hear a sound and then it drifts away, but so far there does not appear to be any bells. Mark Phillips is above St. Peter's Square, our convent location. He says he does not hear any bells, but there are waves and waves of applause that are coming up from the square. Mark, what are you hearing from your standpoint?
Well, I'm hearing a lot of people cheering on the square. People almost, it seems, not quite ready to believe that this could be a white smoke, a papal election indication, but it is looking more and more that way. One of the questions that's never been answered here was how would the people who ring the bells know what the selection was, or that there had been a selection, presumably without any communication other than the smoke coming out of the Sistine Chapel. Then the bell man would have to wait until he was confirmed that that was white smoke as well. We don't know the nature of the internal communications within the Basilica behind me here, and within the Vatican City behind me here. But as you can see now, there are more and more people on the square here who are expecting those bells to ring any moment. And judging from the kind of smoke that we've seen in the 2 previous emissions yesterday evening and today, that smoke had turned a very dark color by now. This emission has not turned a very dark color, and a lot of people here are becoming increasingly convinced that we have a new pope in the making here. They're gazing up and still waiting for bells to ring, but I have to tell you, we have not heard any yet, and I imagine that the people in charge of the bells are going through the same confusion that we are now.
This is Bob Schieffer back in New York. And gentlemen, I must say just the irony of what we are seeing here in this age of communication in which we all live, in this time when we can flash news around the world by the speed of light. And yet we're all sitting here trying, you're there, we're here, trying to figure out if we're seeing white smoke or black smoke coming out of this little smokestack there in the Vatican, and trying to hear, are those bells ringing, are they not ringing, because the wind is blowing a certain way. It's just an amazing sight, an amazing event we are watching here, and it, I think, reminds us all of how ancient this whole office of the Pope is. They've been doing it this way for over 1,000 years, and we're still depending on a very ancient form of communication, smoke signals, to determine what has happened here. John?
Well, Bob, I was remarking yesterday that that's not the only irony here in the Eternal City this week. For all of the spectacular sights that there are here in Rome, the Trevi Fountain, the Spanish Steps, the old Roman Colosseum, and the ancient city, we have been transfixed with this piece of steel atop the Sistine Chapel. People down in the square by the thousands have brought out binoculars to stare at this for hours on end. And it really is quite ironic when you think that amid the beauty of Rome, this lone steel pipe is the thing that everybody has been watching and that has really stolen the show. And Bob, I would have to say that I don't want to make a real leap of faith here, but based on the timing and based on the fact that that smoke has not turned dark, it would seem that on the fourth ballot of this conclave, they may have indeed come to a conclusion. And Father Paul Robichaud, correct me if I'm wrong, but that smoke definitively looks white today.
It looks very white, and what we saw on the first ballot last night was it initially looked white, but it turned black very, very quickly. The smoke is not turning black.
Let's go down
The smoke
to
is not turning black,
John.
definitely.
John, let's go down to Alan Pizzi now. Alan is down amongst all those people, and the pictures we're seeing here, there are a lot of smiling faces down there, Alan.
星光3月 销售
Bob, the people here certainly think they've got a Pope. They're streaming up the Via della Conciliazione, which is the main road that runs into the square. As the smoke came out and word of the smoke came, people began to run out of St. Peter's Basilica into the square. People are looking up at the chimney and at the giant screens. But it's interesting that we've not heard the bells, and we certainly would, because there are 6 bells in St. Peter's. The biggest one weighs 9 tons. In total, they weigh nearly 14 tons. They're 200 years old, some of them. They would be heard. What we don't know is how they get the signal from inside the Sistine Chapel to whoever rings the bells. Now, they did promise the bells would go. There have been mistakes made in the past. They have gotten the color of the smoke wrong, but this time, as you say, it certainly looks white, and I would say that the tens of thousands of people here in the square and the thousands, hundreds, thousands more that are running past me heading towards the square, they certainly think it's white smoke. But we're not going to have absolute confirmation until we hear those bells, and there will be no mistaking, because once they start to ring, the bells all across the city are supposed to join them, and this is a city full of churches and bells. So I would think that when the bells go, we'll know for sure. But everybody here seems absolutely convinced, Bob, that smoke is white. There's been a sea of flags out there. There's a lot of nationalism going on here. I've seen Brazilian, Portuguese, Argentinian, German, French, Spanish, Italian. Everybody who's got, every country just about that's got a candidate who's happily, that's someone who could be a pope. They've got representatives here waving their flags, and I guess, you know, they're all, as you say, those smiling faces, they're all hoping it's one of theirs. But a lot of people are just glad that there's a pope. The whole mood here changed palpably from the funeral over the last few days, especially. It's become almost festive, and now I think it's approaching the rapturous, I would say. And as soon as they ring the bells and make some kind of an announcement, we're going to know. Now, the time between the actual announcement, yes.
Alan, let me interrupt you just for a minute to remind people we're approaching the time when they normally ring the bells. So just as a normal part of the schedule. So there may be some confusion here. Let's go over now to Mark Phillips and get his take on all of this. Mark, where exactly are you?
Well, I'm just on the rooftop overlooking both the smokestack, which we're staring at, of course, so with increasing interest in these huge crowds that are forming up in the square. I'm pausing here because I thought I heard a bell tolling, but I will tell you that we're just coming up to 6 o'clock Rome time, so there will be the natural tolling of the bells on the hour here to further add to the confusion of exactly what's going on. That may well be taken by the people in the square. I think we can count on it, judging from the mood that we've seen developing, that will be confirmation that a pope has been selected. But I'm not sure that those bells are the bells that were intended to be rung at the time of the actual election of a pope. There was always, we've been talking about the irony, but this is
We need to have a camera
communication age, instant age. We've been talking about just how ironic a situation this is, but it's also a very theatrical and dramatic one. And part of it is the tension that this whole scenario creates. The smoke comes out, you immediately don't know which color it is, then it settles into black or white, black previously, apparently white this time, but we're still waiting for the confirmation of that. But even if it is, even if the bells do now go and we can conclude that a pope has been elected, there is now another period when the newly elected pope will be fitted with his robes, will choose a name, will have dedications to him from the other cardinals who elected him, and a good hour or so at least until he appears before the square and we know who he is. So this may be just one more act in a drama that's being played out here, and we could be sitting here talking and wondering who it is. Bells are going, but that could be 6 o'clock, or it could be a new pope. You can pick it either way at this point. We're just going to have to wait and see and try not to make any huge mistake as to just what's going on here, Bob.
Okay, and so I take it these are the bells that would normally ring at 6 o'clock Rome time. That may be what we're hearing now. Is that right, Mark?
Well, yes, that may be what we're hearing now. This would be the time the 6 o'clock bells go. I'm going to turn and look. The big bell, there's a big bell on the upper left-hand corner of the Vatican as you look at it, at the facade of St. Peter's as you look at it, and presumably it would be the one.
Father Robichaud says those aren't the 6 o'clock
ceremonial.
All right, Mark, let me go up to John Roberts right
Maybe
now.
they're not.
Mark, let me go up to John Roberts right now. He's kind of our bell expert. What are you making of this,
I think
John?
he's right. I think he's right.
Well, Father,
Yeah, that's not the 6 o'clock bell.
what I'm hearing from Father Robichaud, we just looked a picture there. Father Robichaud says he does not believe this is the 6 o'clock bell. Let me bring in Father Bob Wister, who's here with us in New York. Father, what do you think is going on here?
I think what's going on here is confusion. The smoke came 10 minutes before 6 Rome time. Some bell is going to go off in Rome on the 6 o'clock hour. And now everyone has to try to discern whether or not there has been an election. It seems that there very probably has been an election just from the timing. The Cardinals don't seem to have had enough time to do two ballots this afternoon.
Explain what you mean by that, and why we're putting some significance in the smoke coming at exactly this time.
The Cardinals when they enter into the conclave for their afternoon or morning session, will take 2 ballots. And if after the first ballot they have not elected a pope, they simply move to the second ballot and don't burn the ballots until after that second ballot. But should the ballots be burned after the first ballot of the afternoon, that would indicate that they have an election. Otherwise, they'd be waiting till later after their second tally is taken.
Let's get back to Mark Phillips. Mark?
Well, we're still trying to figure out here whether the bells that we're hearing, and we are hearing bells, are the ones that indicate an election of the new pope. The normal 6 o'clock bells here are kind of classic chimes. A big gong, 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 6 of them. I'm pausing to listen again. I thought I heard just that. That didn't appear to be what we heard as these bells went off. But we're surrounded here. This is Rome, and there's a church steeple and a cupola with bells in it just about everywhere you look, and the sound of bells carries over this town, depending which way the wind is blowing. But there we go. I think we've now got it. I think we can say that is the main ceremonial bell in the Vatican. I think we can say at this point we have a new pope. Now the issue is, who is he and what does he represent? I'm here with Father Mike Russo of St. Mary's College in California, and I guess, Father Russo, this is the point of time when we start just speculating as to what about this would have been 3 ballots, 1 last night, 2 more today, this morning. This would have been the 4th ballot that this next pope would have been elected on. Can we draw any conclusion?
I don't think we can. I must say that even confusion is traditional here. I remember back in '78, the only indication that the Pope John Paul I had been elected was actually the opening of the window. That was the cue to the people in the crowd. Otherwise, this is probably the best system we have with the bells, now that we know the bells have rung.
Well, if drama is the intention here, then it certainly has had exactly that effect, cheering people and ringing bells.
Well, if what has happened is what we think has happened, in a short time, then we expect the senior cardinal deacon, Jorge Medina Estevez, to announce to the people in St. Peter's Square the name of the new pope. He will shout a phrase in Latin. Father, what will that be?
He will shout the phrase, Habemus Papam, we have a pope. And then, as part of the Latin formula that follows, reveal the name of the Pope as Cardinal and the name he is taking as Holy Father.
And how long would you expect it would be between the ringing of the bells before we see the next step, the announcement that they have a Pope?
I would expect about 45 minutes, because part of the ceremonial, after the newly elected Pope has accepted, each of the cardinals process to him to offer him their allegiance and obedience. And of course, before that, he has to be garbed in the white cassock. He enters off to the left of the altar, what is called the Room of Tears, where they have 3 cassocks waiting, small, medium, and large. And hopefully one of them will fit him pretty well. It hasn't always worked in the past. Some have had cassocks pinned up in the back because they were so small. And Pope John the 23rd apparently had a bit of trouble getting into the largest one.
All right, well, let's go back to John Roberts now.
Oh, Bob, and the waves of cheers and applause just keep on rolling up to our position here, which is about 3 city blocks away from St. Peter's Square. Just an amazing scene. We haven't seen this bell ring since the Pope's funeral. It was a fairly short time that it took to elect a new Pope, but it's not unprecedented. The shortest papal election of the past century was 2 days and 3 ballots. That was in 1939 for Pius XII. The election for John Paul I was 2 days and 4 ballots, which is the same amount of time as this one was. The question now on everybody's mind is who exactly has been elected. The favorite going in was Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, the Dean of the College of Cardinals, the man who is the head of the doctrine of the faith. He really is the Roman Catholic Church watchdog. It's not known whether or not he possibly could have prevailed, or whether or not another candidate who was challenging him perhaps might have gained some momentum over the course of the last 3 ballots and gotten up to that 2/3 majority. But what we definitely know is that 77 of the 115 cardinals who were locked in that conclave have voted for a candidate. Father Paul Robichaud, I want to ask you, I got to ask you, what's your best guess for what happened?
Well, it's pure speculation, but because we don't know, because everything was so secret. But what we do know, based on past experiences, is that someone very early on gained a great deal of momentum and won on the 4th ballot.
There was no consensus candidate going into this. It was thought that Ratzinger may have had 50, perhaps 55 votes at maximum, and no one was talking about any other candidate having near that number of votes. How is it possible that without a consensus candidate going into this conclave, they could have come up with one who, while isn't a consensus candidate, had a 2/3 majority?
This is really an amazing historic moment, and we, again, until we know who the new Pope is, we won't really be able to speculate very clearly. But what seems fairly evident is that very early on, the Cardinals made a decision, and momentum was with one of them, and he's the new Pope.
And let's go back to Bob in New York right now.
All right, just so we can go down to Richard Roth, who is down among that huge throng. That must be quite a scene for you, Richard. I think we're not going to be able to get to Richard right now. He may not, because of all the noise down there, he may not be able to even hear us. Alan Pizzi's also down there. Alan, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Bob. I think the problem with Richard is that he's absolutely surrounded by a surging sea of people. They're running from every direction. It's like a rock concert, a giant party's going on. And now we can finally absolutely clearly hear the bells. You can maybe see them in the shot up in that top left-hand corner of St. Peter. They're swinging the full length of their swing. That also they're up on the giant screens, and surely everybody in Rome, certainly, even if they're not watching television, must know now that there is a new pope. The interesting thing now will be, of course, who is he? As you say, it could be half an hour to an hour before we know. Interestingly, the official Vatican newspaper, Osservatore Romano, has prepared 60 different front-page leads. They've got 60 candidates profiled, and they say they'll hit the streets with a special edition, a very limited number of pages, but a special edition within an hour or so of the Pope being announced. But they're going to be sitting there wondering which button to push, which one to roll on. And that's what everybody here, of course, wants to know. He will appear on that balcony that's draped with the purplish, reddish, burgundy kind of curtains. And all eyes are going to be focused. Everywhere you look, there are people taking pictures and people on cell phones. This has got to be the most widely reported event that I've ever seen. There are cameras in amongst the crowd. The platform I'm on's got about 40 or 50 cameras. All along the colonnade on the left-hand side is lined with cameras. And as I say, that whatever we're reporting is being reported 10 times as much, I think, by the number of people down there taking pictures and using their cell phones. The crowd just keeps growing. This piazza will hold 250 to 300,000 people. Now, there's not that many yet, but I would venture to say that soon there will be, because they're streaming their way in. People were here already, of course, maybe 20, 30,000 through the afternoon, but now it's absolutely filling up. It's every race, color, size, and description you can imagine. People on bicycles. The streets all around here are going to be closed to traffic as quickly as the police can manage it, because they're assuming it's going to be just like it was for the funeral, Bob.
All right. Thank you very much, Alan. We're going to continue to look at these astonishing pictures there in St. Peter's Square. But as we do, we want to bring in Monsignor Brian Firm, who is the Dean of Canon Law at Catholic University and held the same post in the Vatican. Father, you spent many years in the Vatican. What's going on inside now while these crowds continue to swell outside in St. Peter's Square?
Well, I imagine there's the equal amount of excitement amongst the cardinals having just elected a new pope. Theoretically, according to the Constitution, once the pope has been elected and then goes into the room of tears and places on his papal clothes, the cardinals are supposed to give him homage and obeisance. And theoretically, that is what is probably happening now. But I must admit, what is a bit difficult to determine is whether there were one or two ballots this afternoon or this evening in Rome, and that I'd be very interested to know later on, whether in fact the new pope was elected on what would have been the fourth ballot or on the fifth ballot, because when the smoke came out, it was a bit difficult to tell whether it was a smoke of one ballot or two ballots this afternoon.
Why is that significant in your view? Because it really didn't take them very long this time, did it?
No, it's not actually significant in one sense whether it was on the first or second ballot this afternoon. I think it's probably significant simply because, as someone else I think has suggested earlier, someone went into the conclave probably with very strong number of votes, and that they not only held up but actually increased to the 2/3 majority, so that a very short conclave, as it were, in 4 or 5 ballots, is an indication that the cardinals are fairly united and were fairly clear on the person they wanted, who was fairly clear to them when they entered the conclave.
How do they, as we know, the cardinals do not campaign for themselves, but as I understand it, they do have advocates. What's been going on for the past couple of days, not just in the chapel where they take these votes, but when they gather for dinner at night, do they actually make little campaign speeches for the people they're for, or how do you do this? How do you advance your cause?
Well, I think a great deal of thought was actually given to various possible candidates before they actually entered into the residence on Sunday. And a great deal of thought was given to residents, mainly because the cardinals were thinking of the type of person they wanted as Pope who would meet the various challenges of the church. Actually, in the residence, there wouldn't have been campaign speeches in the sense we might think of here in America, but there certainly would have been discussions amongst various cardinals as to how, what the church needed and who was the person most suited to lead the church. So it would be a much more informal type of discussion, but certainly genuine discussions.
But in reality, they do sort of lay out platforms, do they not?
I think, yes, you're absolutely correct. They lay out platforms rather indirectly, in the sense, well, let's put it this way. I suspect the sermon of Cardinal Ratzinger on Monday, yesterday, at the Mass for the election of the Pope, was in a certain sense not so much a laying out of a platform as an American political person might do, but a suggestion is, these are the problems I see in the church, and in a sense, if you elect me, this is a problem, or these are the problems I see, and this is how I intend or would like to confront them. So it's a rather indirect fashion.
If you had to make a guess right now, would you guess that Ratzinger might be the one that was selected, because we understand that he had a considerable block of votes, as it were, when this all began?
Well, I'm not very good at making guesses, and I'm going to wait a half hour to make it. But
very good.
Certainly, Cardinal Ratzinger will be there.
Very good, Monsignor. Let's go back to Mark Phillips. Mark?
你知道可以轻松简单。
I'm not going to guess either here, Bob, tempting though it is. And of course, guessing's been the name of the game here up until this vote, and we'll continue or so. I'm here with Father Mike Russo as well. We're just sitting here talking about what the significance is, of the fact that this was a relatively quick conclave. We think probably that there was one. There could have been two votes this afternoon, but given when the smoke emerged, it was probably just one vote. We're waiting for the new Pope to step out onto the Central Loggia balcony in the main facade of St. Peter's Basilica. And it's not just a question of the man who steps up there, it's a question of what he'll represent in terms of what the church sees as its main mission and its main challenges. Of course, Bob was mentioning Cardinal Ratzinger and what have you. If it's him, what do you think the Cardinals will have concluded as to what approach they ought to have in what they're facing?
Well, I think Cardinal Ratzinger, of course, yesterday kind of gave his indication that Mass is a worldview. And obviously, if he is the candidate, if he is the person who walks out as Pope, they will have affirmed that. It's interesting, I think there's been a period of discernment among the cardinals, both at the residency at the Vatican and
discussion.
Sure they have. And so, again, no one could predict who was going to walk out on that balcony, but we have to wait that half hour.
Well, we do, but when we see who it is, we'll be able to draw conclusions about what the church wants to do. We all know, and everybody's been talking since the death of John Paul II as to what he follow. The question being whether they will try to follow with another charismatic leader. They have one who can match him, or somebody perhaps cast less of a shadow, but was more collegial and more cooperative with the other bishops and what have you. When we first see the man who will be Pope at that point is Pope step out on that balcony, will we be able to draw conclusions as to where this church is going?
I think we can. I mean, I think we're going to be saying that this individual will have a vision for where he wants to bring the church in the next few years, the next decade. It'll be very interesting in the next few moments as this thing transpires.
Because there were some pretty dramatic choices
among these
candidates. Interestingly, this was probably the most homogenous, if you think of it in terms of who appointed them, conclave, certainly in recent Vatican history, because of this Pope. And we'll go back to Bob now. But the man who comes out of there will mean a great deal, not just to Catholics, but to people right around the world.
Absolutely.
Bob.
Well, we just saw, Mark, we just saw someone sort of peeking out, it appeared, parting that curtain just a little bit. as if this were in a theater and someone was behind the curtain and looking to see how many people were out there in the seats. In this case, of course, they're all in St. Peter's Square. I want to go back now to John Roberts. John, all of these cardinals take a vow of silence, but as we know now, eventually we'll begin to find out what is happening. I wonder how long it will be, and I wonder what Father Robichaud would say. How long do you think it'll be before we'll get some details about how this vote went, and who voted for who, and what was the deciding factor?
Well, Bob, we'll probably never know really who voted for who in terms of how many ballots each cardinal, each candidate got on each individual ballot. That's something that could either come out within a matter of days or something that we may not know about for years. And a lot of that will be at the discretion of the next pope. Now, John Paul II was a pretty media-savvy and pretty media-friendly pope. The next pope may carry on in that tradition and may indeed release the results of the balloting over the next days or weeks, or perhaps it's a cardinal who believes that it's better if the world does not know what the particular factions were within the conclave and doesn't tell us. There have been in the past some cardinals who have taken notes and breaking their vow of secrecy, because the only person who can allow a cardinal to talk about what the results of the elections were is the Pope himself. So breaking their vow of secrecy, they've actually published these in memoirs, and that has sometimes been decades later. I would expect, though, given the fact that this Vatican has been uncharacteristically open about everything from the Pope's health over the recent months to the way that they conducted the funeral and televised it around the world, to the fact that they allowed cameras inside the Sistine Chapel just as the conclave was beginning, then we'll probably learn something in the next few days about how the balloting went. Now, in terms of how many ballots were taken today to elect the Pope, and whether it was on the first ballot this afternoon or the second ballot, we're just sitting here thinking about the timing, and let's not forget that after the ballots have been taken, the scrutineers have gone through them, counted them, written down the names of the cardinals, and found out that one of them did garner 77 votes for that two-thirds supermajority. Then there are a couple of things that need to take place. The elected pope has to be approached and asked if he wants the job, and then what name he will take. So that could have accounted for the delay in the appearance of the white smoke. We pretty much thought that we were just about at the end of the window for white smoke coming from a first ballot. But if you count in some of those pro forma ceremonies that need to take place,